The Grand Chancel of Xylos was a place of petrified silence, a cavern of cosmic judgment carved from the heart of a moon that had died before the Xylan species had ever looked to the stars. Its walls were of polished obsidian veined with filaments of captured light, remnants of nebulae from a forgotten eon. High above, the domed ceiling was not a ceiling at all, but a living star chart, a slow, majestic ballet of galaxies rendered in real time through gravitic lensing that bent spacetime itself to bring the universe into the room. On the central dais, floating upon a disk of serene, stabilized gravity, sat the elders of the consortium, a gathering of minds from 1,000 worlds, representing empires that had charted the void when humanity's ancestors were still mastering fire. Today, that ancient silence was strained, stretched thin by a tension that felt like a physical weight, a pressure on the very air they breathed. The subject of their deliberation was, as it had been for many cycles, the species known as human. Elder Kalen of Xylos, his scaled skin the color of aged parchment and his multiple eyes blinking in a slow, asynchronous rhythm, felt the weight more than most. As the designated arbiter for this session, the currents of galactic opinion flowed through him, and the current was turbulent. He watched the high praetor of the Glyptons, Vorlag, rise to speak. Vorlag was a creature of granite and fury, his species having evolved on a world of crushing gravity and constant warfare. His carapace was a mosaic of battle scars and ceremonial etchings, and his voice was the grinding of tectonic plates. "Esteemed elders, assembled minds of the known galaxy," Vorlag began, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the dais. "We have convened and reconvened. We have debated and deliberated. We have listened to the whispers and rumors carried on the solar winds from the Terran sector. And for what? To endlessly contemplate a species of short-lived, soft-skinned primitives who have barely learned to walk beyond their own star system." He gestured with a massive, clawed hand toward the star chart, indicating a small, unremarkable spiral arm. "There, the cradle of humanity, a negligible presence, and yet we afford them the gravity of a galactic crisis. Why? Because of an idea." The word dripped from his mandibles with undisguised contempt. Around the chamber, a low murmur rippled through the assembled delegates, a sound of assent from the martial races, a hesitant shimmer of light from the Luminians, a frustrated sigh from the synthetics of the Cygnian assembly. An idea so absurd, so fundamentally at odds with every known principle of void dynamics that it borders on religious mysticism, Vorlag continued, his voice rising. "They claim the void is not empty. They speak of it as a medium, a substrate that can be listened to. They propose that our void drives, the very engines of our civilization that have allowed us to cross the stars for millennia, are a form of violence. A shouting into the silence, they call it. And what is their alternative? This preposterous theory of resonance, a philosophy, not a technology. They suggest one can harmonize with the fabric of spacetime and simply arrive. It is the rambling of poets, not the work of engineers." He paused, letting his derision settle over the chamber. "They have no grand fleets. Their energy signatures are laughably faint. Their colonial expansion is timid, almost apologetic. By every metric the consortium uses to gauge a species' potential, they are insignificant. We laughed when we first intercepted their philosophical transmissions. It was a curiosity, a charmingly naive belief system from a child race. But now their envoys speak of it in diplomatic channels. They present this superstition as a serious principle. They are not merely naive, they are arrogant. They seek to rewrite the fundamental laws of the universe with prose." Kalen felt a deep weariness. Vorlag's perspective was shared by many. It was the logical, pragmatic view. The consortium was built on the bedrock of established science. Their ships tore through the void by generating immense, localized gravitational disruptions, punching a hole from one point to another. It was violent, energy-intensive, and it worked. It had worked for tens of thousands of years. The scars of this travel, faint, residual tears in spacetime, were well documented, an acceptable cost of interstellar civilization. The humans, in their baffling infancy, were suggesting they stop. It was akin to a newly sentient aquatic creature telling a leviathan that swimming was the wrong way to cross an ocean. High Praetor Kalen's voice was soft, yet it carried an authority that cut through Vorlag's booming echo. "Your points are recorded. Your logic is sound from a certain perspective, yet there are anomalies. Reports from our deep-range sensor nets in the Perseus Veil, patrols that have encountered Huma. And vessels." "Anomalies?" Vorlag scoffed. "I have read the reports. A single small exploration craft appearing where none was before. Its signature was so faint it was initially dismissed as a sensor ghost. This is not a sign of advanced technology. It is a sign of primitive technology, of engines so weak they can barely be detected. Or a new voice intervened, not of sound, but of pure modulated light that was instantly translated by the chamber's psionic relays. It is a sign of technology so efficient it leaves no wake. The voice belonged to the Luminians, a collective consciousness of non-corporeal energy beings who existed as a shimmering aurora in their containment field. We have observed the humans' passage. There is a cleanliness to it, a quiet. The void drives of the consortium scream. They leave a trail of dissonance, a shriek of tortured spacetime. The wake of a human ship is silence, a healed stillness. Vorlag turned his massive form toward the Luminians, his contempt now mixed with a grudging respect for the ancient energy beings. Silence, stillness, harmony. These are the words of mystics, not strategists. Power is not silent. Power announces itself. It carves its name into the cosmos. The humans whisper. We, the Glyptons, roar. History has always favored the roar. The debate continued, a slow, gravitational dance of ideology. The Cygnian synthetics argued from a standpoint of pure data, noting that while human technology was statistically unimpressive, their societal growth and technological advancement followed an exponential curve that was, in itself, an anomaly. They learned, adapted, and innovated at a rate that defied predictive models. The insectoid Cathar, ever pragmatic, worried about the economic implications of the human idea. If true, it would render the consortium's entire energy infrastructure, built around the production of exotic matter for void drives, obsolete. Entire star systems, entire economies would collapse. The idea was not just absurd, it was dangerous. It threatened the stability of the galaxy more than any fleet of warships ever could. Kalen listened, his ancient mind sifting through the layers of fear, arrogance, and vested interest. He had studied the humans more closely than any other in the chamber. He had read their salvaged literature, listened to their music, even attempted to understand their peculiar philosophies of individualism and collective responsibility. They were a paradox. They were capable of savage, internal conflict, yet they spoke of universal ethics with a sincerity that was unsettling. They were physically fragile, yet they climbed out of their gravity well on pillars of controlled fire, a feat of sheer, stubborn will. And their idea, Kalen, in the quiet solitude of his meditation chamber, had allowed himself to consider it. What if it were not a metaphor? What if the void was not an absence, but a presence? An ocean with its own currents, its own tides, its own life. The consortium had built ships like brutal iron wedges, forcing their way through the waves. The humans, perhaps, had learned to build sails. The thought was both beautiful and terrifying. It meant that for all their power, for all their history, the most powerful races in the galaxy were still flailing in the water, while a younger race had learned to glide upon the wind. He, unlike Vorlag, did not laugh. He felt a deep, chilling premonition, a sense that they were all standing at the precipice of a revelation that would shatter their understanding of existence. They have requested a formal audience, Kalen announced, his voice bringing the fractious debate to a halt. The chamber fell silent again, the tension returning, thicker than before. Their ambassador has been waiting at the edge of the Xylos system. They have not activated a void drive. They have not sent a request for docking clearance. They have simply been waiting, patiently. Vorlag let out a low growl. Summon them. Let this human come before us and speak their poetry. Let us see this purveyor of nursery rhymes, and then let us put an end to this distraction. We have real threats to consider. The Krogan incursions in the outer rim, the stellar decay in the Cygnus arm. The galaxy has no time for human fables. Kalen inclined his head. He did not need a formal vote. The consensus was clear. They needed to see, to hear, to confront this enigma directly. He focused his will, interfacing with the Chancel's command systems. A silent, psionic command was sent to the Xylan Fleet Command, which in turn relayed a coded message to the human vessel waiting in the silent darkness beyond the system's last planet. The summons has been sent, Kalen announced. The human ambassador will be brought to the chancel. The assembled elders and delegates settled back onto their designated platforms. The air grew still. The living star chart above continued its silent, cosmic dance, indifferent. They waited. G to Consortium Protocol, a diplomatic vessel would take a standard amount of time to travel from the system's edge to the high orbit of Xylos's moon. Then there would be the complex ballet of docking procedures, security scans, and transport to the chancel. The wait was expected to be long. It was not. Mere moments after Kalen spoke, a subtle shift occurred in the very center of the grand chancel. It was not a sound, nor a flash of light. It was a feeling, a localized warping of perception, as if the space before the main dais had grown deeper, more real. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with a strange, crystalline clarity. And then, standing there as if she had simply stepped out of a fold in reality, was a single human female. A collective gasp, a wave of shock rippled through the chamber. Glypton guards, positioned around the perimeter, raised their plasma rifles, their armored forms tensing. Vorlag himself rose halfway from his seat, his mandibles clicking in disbelief and fury. How had she bypassed every layer of security? The system's sensor grid, the orbital defense platforms, the moon's own shield, the chancel's impenetrable walls, none of them had registered a thing. There was no transport beam, no wormhole, no energy signature of any kind. She had not arrived. She was simply there. The human stood calmly, her hands clasped loosely before her. She wore a simple dark blue uniform devoid of ornamentation. Her face was pale, her dark hair was cut short, and her eyes, two dark, intelligent pools, scanned the astonished faces of the council with a serene, unreadable expression. She was a creature of soft flesh and fragile bone, standing in a room of beings made of rock, energy, and ancient metal, and yet she radiated an aura of absolute composure. Kalen felt his primary hearts thrumming in his chest. The silence in the room was now one of utter, profound shock. The Luminians, light pulsed with a rapid, intense rhythm, a sign of extreme intellectual excitement. Even Vorlag was momentarily speechless, his arrogance fractured by the sheer impossibility of what he was witnessing. The human ambassador had just given them the first demonstration of the idea they had laughed at. And it was not a poem, it was a fact. The human ambassador, her name transmitted to them as Eva Rostova, inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect that was both subtle and profound. "Elders of the consortium, I thank you for granting this audience," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and unamplified, yet it reached every corner of the vast chamber, as if the air itself had conspired to carry it. The universal translator rendered her words with perfect fidelity, but it could not translate the unnerving tranquility in her tone. Vorlag was the first to recover his voice, the shock now curdling into rage. "By what sorcery do you stand here?" he boomed, his voice shaking the dais. "You have bypassed the defenses of a fortress that has stood unbreached for 10,000 years. This is an act of aggression, an invasion." His guards leveled their weapons, the barrels glowing with lethal energy. Ambassador Rostova did not flinch. She did not even look at the guards. Her gaze remained on the council, primarily on Kalen. "There was no aggression," she replied, her voice maintaining its even keel. "There was no bypass. Your defenses are designed to detect motion through space. They look for the tearing of the void, for the heat and energy of propulsion. We do not move through space in that manner. We simply reposition. Think of the universe not as a landscape to be traversed, but as a page of text. Your ships are like a finger, tracing a line from one word to another. Our ships are like a reader's eye, which can simply lift and focus on a new word instantly. There is no line drawn between them. There is only a shift in focus." Her analogy hung in the air, simple, elegant, and utterly terrifying. It confirmed what the Luminians had sensed and what Kalen had feared. They were not using a new kind of engine. They were using a new kind of physics. Kalen raised a slender, three-fingered hand, and the Glypton guards reluctantly lowered their weapons. He held Vorlag's furious gaze for a moment before turning his own multifaceted eyes back to the human. "Your arrival is noted, Ambassador Rostova. You have made a powerful statement without speaking a word, yet it is your words we have summoned you to hear. Your people speak of void resonance. High Praetor Vorlag has called it poetry. The Cathar call it a threat to economic stability. The Luminians call it harmony. What do you call it?" "We call it truth," Rostova said simply. "We did not invent this principle, we discovered it. The universe has always operated this way. You were simply the first sapient cluster to develop the technology for a different path, a path of force." She paused, letting them absorb the gentle correction. She was not accusing them, she was stating a fact. "CT, your void drives function by creating a brute force rupture in spacetime. They are loud, inefficient, and they cause damage. You have noticed the residual scarring, the faint echoes of your passages. You dismiss them as an acceptable side effect. We do not." Vorlag let out a harsh, grating sound that was the Glypton equivalent of a laugh. "Damage? The void is infinite. To suggest we could damage, it is the height of arrogance. A single solar flare releases more energy than our entire fleet's drives in a year. The universe does not care about our shouting." Does a deep ocean care about a single drop of poison? Rostova countered, her voice still soft, yet now carrying a sharp edge of seriousness. No, but a billion drops, a trillion, released every second for thousands of years, eventually the ocean begins to sicken. Space-time is not an empty vacuum. It is a quantum foam, a complex, interconnected architecture. Every time you force a passage, you snap countless threads in that architecture. They do not all heal correctly. Scars form. Weaknesses. Dissonances. Kalen felt a cold dread seep into his ancient bones. He had seen the sensor readings of these so-called scars. They were areas of slight chronoton variance, of unstable quantum entanglement. Consortium science had always classified them as harmless echoes. But what if they were not echoes? What if they were wounds? Even if we were to accept this disturbing hypothesis, Kalen said slowly, choosing his words with immense care, what is the alternative? Are we to abandon interstellar travel, to confine ourselves to our home systems and crawl between them at sublight speeds? Your resonance theory is an elegant philosophy, ambassador, but is it a practical technology for a galactic civilization? It is the only sustainable one, Rostova replied. She raised her hand, and a small, dark device on her wrist projected a holographic image into the air before her. It was a model of a human ship. It was sleek, organic in its lines, but what was striking was what it lacked. There were no visible engines, no massive reactor housings, no weapon emplacements. It looked more like a sculpture than a starship. This is the Stellaluna, my vessel, currently waiting where your fleet command asked it to, she explained. It does not have an engine in the way you understand it. It has a resonance chamber. Inside, a stabilized microsingularity is entangled with the quantum state of the ship itself. To travel, we do not calculate a trajectory. We calculate a destination's existential coordinates in the universal substrate. We then attune the singularity to those coordinates. The universe, which abhors a paradox, resolves the dissonance by repositioning the ship. It is not movement. It is a form of instantaneous quantum state shifting. The only energy consumed is in the calculation and the attunement. It is silent. It is efficient, and it leaves the void as pristine as we found it. The chamber was utterly still. The concepts she was describing were so far beyond their own technological paradigms that it felt like listening to a being from a higher dimension. Quantum entanglement was a known science, but on a macro scale, for an object as large as a starship. It was theoretical, a fantasy. The energy requirements alone were thought to be astronomical, requiring the output of a sun. The energy cost? The Cygnian synthetic delegate broadcasted, its synthesized voice a monotone of pure logic. The power required to maintain quantum coherence on a macro scale and entangle it with a singularity would exceed the output of a main sequence star. Your ship's energy signature is negligible. This is a contradiction. Rostova's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. That is because you are still thinking of power as a brute force. You seek to generate energy, we seek to borrow it. The universe is filled with latent energy, the zero-point field. Your drives fight against it. Our resonance chambers harmonize with it, drawing what is needed and returning it. It is like dipping a cup into a river to drink, rather than trying to empty the river with a bucket. Vorlag, who had been listening with a mixture of disbelief and growing unease, slammed his fist on the railing of his platform. The impact sent a shockwave of sound through the chamber. Enough of these metaphors and riddles. You speak of cups and rivers, of silent whispers and songs. This is not proof. It is evasion. If your technology is so superior, then demonstrate it. Show us power that we can understand, not a parlor trick in our council chamber. Show us something that matters. Something with consequence. The challenge hung in the air, heavy and final. The military faction of the consortium was speaking through Vorlag. They respected one thing above all else, demonstrable power, not philosophical elegance, not efficiency. Power. Ambassador Rostova looked at Vorlag, her calm expression unwavering. For a low NG moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, becoming a battlefield of wills between the furious Glypton praetor and the serene human diplomat. Kalen watched, his many eyes focused on the human. He saw no fear in her, no anger, no arrogance. He saw a deep, profound sadness. Finally, she nodded slowly. Very well, we did not wish to do this. We do not believe in displays of force. Our philosophy is one of coexistence, not dominance. But you are correct. You will not understand our words until you understand the truth behind them. You ask for a demonstration of power. We will give you a demonstration of consequence. She turned her gaze to Kalen. Elder Kalen, I asked the consortium to direct its most powerful deep-range sensors to the Iridian Nebula, specifically to the dead star system at its heart, designated colloquially as the graveyard. It is a system where the star went nova eons ago, leaving nothing but cold cinders and sterile, rocky debris. A place of absolute entropy and death. Please focus all your perception there. Kalen hesitated for only a second before nodding to his aides. The command was given. Across the galaxy, the consortium's vast network of sensor arrays, gravitic telescopes, and quantum observatories swiveled to focus on the designated coordinates. In the grand chancel, a section of the living star chart overhead zoomed in, the image shifting from a galactic swirl to a dark, turbulent nebula, and then to a single point of blackness within it, a star system devoid of light and life. The image was fed directly from their most powerful observatory. "We are focused," Kalen confirmed, his voice low. The entire council was now staring at the image of the dead system. They expected a weapons discharge, a planet-shattering explosion, the ignition of a new star, something that would fit their definition of power. Rostova watched the screen with them. "We will not be firing a weapon," she said softly. "We will not be destroying anything. You have asked for a demonstration of our understanding of the void. We will show you. We will not shout. We will hum." She closed her eyes. On her wrist, the small device glowed with a soft, white light. For several long, agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The image of the dead system remained unchanged. Vorlag began to make a low, rumbling sound of triumphant scorn. And then it began. It was not an explosion. It was the opposite. On the screens within the blackness of the dead system, a point of light appeared. Then another and another. They were not stars. They were colors. Wisps of incandescent gas, hydrogen red, oxygen blue, helium gold, began to coalesce out of the absolute nothingness. The dust and debris that had drifted aimlessly for 1 billion years began to move, not randomly, but with purpose. They were being organized. The process accelerated. The wisps of gas swirled into vast, elegant ribbons of light. The dust clouds spiraled into intricate, geometric patterns. It was as if an unseen celestial artist was painting on the canvas of the void, using nebulae as their medium. The dead system, a place of ultimate decay, was being filled with structure, with beauty, with creation. Within minutes, the screen showed something impossible. Where there had been a cold, dark void, there was now a new nebula, a stellar nursery in its infancy, glowing with the light of its own nascent energy. But it was not a random cloud. It was a shape. A perfect, complex, multidimensional fractal, a geometric pattern of breathtaking intricacy and scale, a mathematical equation written in fire and starlight across trillions of kilometers of space. It was a message. It was art. It was a demonstration not of destruction, but of control over the very building blocks of the cosmos. The Grand Chancel was silent, not with tension, but with a profound, soul-shaking awe. They had just witnessed a species perform an act of casual genesis. They had asked for a show of power, and the humans had answered by creating a work of art the size of a solar system in a dead corner of the galaxy, using their understanding of the void to orchestrate matter from a distance of thousands of light years, instantly and silently. Vorlag stared at the screen, his massive form utterly still, his mandibles hanging open. The grating sound of his laughter was a ghost, a foolish, distant memory. He was a being of war, a master of destruction. He understood power as the ability to unmake. He had never conceived of power as the ability to make on such a scale. The Luminian's light field glowed with a steady, brilliant white, a color of pure, unadulterated revelation. The Cygnian delegate was silent, its processors likely struggling to reconcile this event with the known laws of thermodynamics and physics. Kalen looked from the impossible nebula on the screen to the calm, solitary human standing before him. He finally understood. The laughter had died, the arrogance had evaporated. The Consortium had spent millennia learning how to conquer the void, while humanity had spent a mere few centuries learning how to dance with it. He looked at Eva Rostova, and for the first time, he did not see a representative of a young, naive race. He saw a messenger from the future. The image of the newly formed, geometrically perfect nebula held the Grand Chancel in a state of suspended reality. The silence was no longer one of tension or shock, but of deep, contemplative reverence. Beings who had commanded fleets that could sterilize planets, who had witnessed the birth and death of stars, were humbled by an act of pure, silent creation. They had expected a sword, and humanity had shown them a paintbrush that used galaxies for a canvas. It was Kalen who finally broke the spell. His voice was soft, laced with an emotion that his species rarely displayed, wonder. How? It was the only word he could summon, yet it contained the weight of 1,000 questions. Ambassador Rostova opened her eyes. The faint glow on her wrist device faded. "We did not create matter or energy," she explained, her tone patient, like a teacher explaining a complex but beautiful theorem. "We simply arranged what was already there. The void of your graveyard system was not empty. It was filled with diffuse hydrogen, interstellar dust, and dormant quantum potential. We used the resonance principle not to move our ship, but to project a coherent waveform across spacetime, a complex organizing frequency. This frequency encouraged the particles to find a lower energy state by coalescing. We provided a blueprint, and the universe, following the path of least resistance, assembled it. We did not command. We suggested." "Suggested?" Vorlag whispered, the word a gravelly rasp. He slowly sank back into his seat, his massive frame looking smaller, less imposing. He looked at his own clawed hands, tools designed for crushing and breaking. He had built his empire, his entire philosophy, on the principle of imposing one's will upon the universe. The humans had just shown him that true power lay in understanding the universe's will and gently guiding it. The council session was no longer a debate. It had become a seminar, and the assembled masters of the galaxy were the students. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry curiosity. The Cathar delegate, its multifaceted eyes blinking rapidly, transmitted a query about the economic implications. Restover explained that resonance technology was not something that could be easily replicated. It was not just a machine. It was a synthesis of technology, consciousness, and a deep, philosophical understanding of the universal substrate. It required a shift in perspective that had taken humanity centuries of introspection to achieve, born from their own internal struggles and their profound sense of connection to their fragile home world. They saw the universe not as a resource to be exploited, but as a system of which they were a part. "We will share our knowledge," Rostova stated, sensing the unasked question that now filled the minds of everyone present. "We did not come here to intimidate you. We came here to warn you." This statement sent a new ripple through the chamber, this one of fear, but of a different kind. It was not the fear of a rival, but the fear of an unknown, shared threat. "Warn us," Kalen pressed, leaning forward. "Of what? You have shown us a power that makes our own seem crude. What could you possibly have to fear?" Rostova's serene expression finally broke, replaced by a look of profound gravity. The sadness Kalen had glimpsed in her eyes earlier returned, deeper now. She gestured to the holographic projector again. The image of the beautiful, man-made nebula dissolved, replaced by the familiar map of the consortium's galactic territory. It was a vast, sprawling empire of light. "This is your space as you see it," she said. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the image changed. The same star chart was overlaid with a new layer of data. It was a dark, spidery network of faint, jagged lines concentrated most heavily along the oldest and most traveled trade routes. They looked like cracks in glass. "And this is your space as the universe sees it," she continued, her voice low and somber. "These are the scars you have been creating with your void drives, the wounds. You believe them to be harmless echoes, but they are not. They are fractures in the fundamental architecture of spacetime, and they are not healing. They are accumulating." A chilling silence fell as the delegates stared at the map. They had seen these lines before on their own charts, these residual chronoton dissonances. But they had never seen them mapped with such clarity, never visualized them as a connected network of decay. It looked like a sickness, a web of corruption spreading through the galaxy. "For millennia, your civilization has been shouting into the void," Rostova said, her voice bar. Ilya whispered now, yet every syllable carried immense weight. "And for all that time, you have assumed no one was listening. You were wrong." The map shifted again. At the edges of the galaxy, in the deep intergalactic void where no consortium ship had ever ventured, new symbols appeared. They were not stars or galaxies. They were presences. Vast, undefined fields of exotic energy that seemed to pulse with a slow, malevolent rhythm. And from these presences, tendrils of influence seemed to be reaching inward, drawn along the network of spacetime scars. "The universe is not empty," Rostova said, her eyes meeting Kalen's. "There are other structures, other forms of existence, beings or forces that live in the higher dimensions in the substrate between the folds of spacetime. For eons, they have been dormant or perhaps simply unaware of us, separated by the immense integrity of the universal fabric. But your drives, the constant, violent tearing of that fabric, it has created pathways, it has sent a signal. A constant, rhythmic pulse of pain and energy. You have been ringing a bell, and something has finally heard it." The full, terrifying implication of her words descended upon the Grand Chancel. The human, idea had never been about technological superiority. Their pleas to stop using the violent void drives had not been the arrogance of a young race telling their elders how to live. It had been a desperate warning from the only people who had learned to listen to the silence. It was the plea of a watchman trying to tell a city of revelers to douse their lights before the predator in the dark noticed them. And it was too late. Vorlag, the mighty warrior, the high praetor of the seemingly invincible Glypton armada, looked at the map, at the encroaching darkness. Kalen could see a tremor in his massive, rocky hand. The threats he had spoken of earlier, the Krogan incursions, the stellar decay, seemed like trivialities now, like children's squabbles in the face of a coming hurricane. "What are they?" Vorlag asked, his voice stripped of all its former bluster, leaving only a raw, hollow core of fear. "We do not know," Rostova admitted. "We have no name for them. We only know them by the effect they have on spacetime, a creeping, nullifying entropy. They are drawn to the wounds you have created. They seem to feed on the dissonance. Our resonance technology allows us to perceive them because we are attuned to the quiet fabric they disrupt. Our silence allows us to hear their approach. Your noise has been masking it while simultaneously inviting them closer." The laughter of the consortium was now a bitter poison in their memories. They had mocked the humans for their quiet, for their timidness, for their lack of a grand fleet. They had seen it as weakness. Now they understood. The humans had not been hiding. They had been holding their breath, hoping not to be noticed. Their entire civilization, their entire philosophy, had been a response to a cosmic horror the consortium had been blindly provoking for ages. Kalen looked at the faces of his fellow elders. He saw the dawn of a new and terrible understanding. The galactic order, as they knew it, was over. Their power, their technology, their history, it had all been built on a foundation of ignorance that was about to be shattered. "You came to us," Kalen said, his voice a statement of dawning realization. "You revealed yourselves, you demonstrated your power, knowing we might react with hostility. Why? Why now?" "Because they have crossed the threshold of the Magellanic clouds," Rostova answered, her gaze fixed on the ominous map. "Their approach has quickened. The damage to spacetime has reached a critical point, creating a stable pathway for them. We could no longer afford to be quiet. Our hope was to teach you to listen before you had to learn by screaming. It appears we are out of time for lessons. The age of laughter is over. Now we must face the silence and what comes with it. Together." She spoke the last word with quiet emphasis. It was not a plea. It was an invitation, an offer of alliance. Not from a position of weakness, but as the only species in the galaxy that understood the nature of the true enemy. In the grand chancel of Xylos, beneath a living map of the heavens that now seemed to mock them with its beauty, the most powerful beings in the galaxy looked at the single, small human before them. They had summoned her to judge her. But it was she, and her entire species, who had judged them, had found them wanting, and had offered them salvation all in the same breath. The awe they had felt at the creation of a nebula was now dwarfed by the terror of the coming darkness. And in that shared terror, a new, fragile seed was planted, the seed of a unified future, born from the ashes of their arrogant laughter. Kalen looked at Ambassador Rostova, then at the creeping dread on the star chart, and knew that the history of the galaxy had just cleaved in two, the long, foolish age of noise, and the terrifying, uncertain age of silence that was about to begin.